We'll give everyone a minute to come in and get themselves settled. Hey, everyone. How have you been, Danny? This is our yearly get-together on a webinar. Really shouldn't be this way.
We should do more often. No,
we should.
We did this, when was it the first time we did it? I think it was December. Oh yeah, it was December because there was 4 of us doing the call and 3 of us were ill. And
okay.
you
COVID?
can, if you
or just old-fashioned ill?
No, just old-fashioned flu, I think. And if you watch the recording, you can really tell me and Rebecca and the first 2 speakers really like trying hard to hide it. And like having to pause every few just to like, because we couldn't really speak. Like day before I couldn't speak at all. So yeah, hopefully this one will be slightly better delivered.
Someone has asked if they're supposed to hear us, and yes is absolutely the answer. So hopefully it is a local problem to them, but if not, everyone come play into me now if you can't hear us as well. I chatted to your team, not yourself, at the SAMPS Awards that we held in November in San Diego.
Yeah.
So it was nice to see them there. They can hear us. Okay, we're good.
Cool. Yeah, I guess then are you going over to SLAS in next? Is it next
we
month?
will. I'm not going to go myself, but then the SAMPS Awards next year will be held in Neuroscience again. So that's going to be in DC. So much easier travel, and myself I'll be in even better form than I was in San Diego because I won't be off a 12-hour flight. Okay. So I think that's everyone come in. So welcome everyone, and Danny has kindly agreed a year later to take us through their survey results. So every year at AZoNetwork, they do a survey of lots of different companies within life science and material and applied research. And they just basically ask them what's going on and compile the data into a lovely report, which they then will take us through. So this really should be interactive. So if anyone has any questions, let us know. And that's what I'm here for, to sort of field those and make sure that we're here to answer. So I work with SciLeads. So we can see a lot of things that are happening in the market when it comes to trade shows and funding. And we work with a lot of people. So hopefully I'll be able to comment on a few things from that respect. And Danny obviously is working with a lot of them as well, and also has this lovely data and lovely graphs. So I'll hand over to you, Danny, and we will get started.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Laura. So this is the 4th edition of the State of Scientific Marketing Report. And as Laura said, we do it for a number of reasons. We want sales and marketers to give them sort of benchmarks to compare against, help them understand the markets that they're working in a bit better. But most importantly, we just want to get people thinking about their strategies and hopefully share some insights that will be useful for them and useful for you when you're planning for the next 12 months or so. And like Laura said, please do throw in any questions at any point during the presentation. Be much better if this is interactive, and we can tackle those as and when we're presenting. So the report is pretty extensive, and it covers sort of all sorts of areas from sales cycles, most effective digital channels, trade shows, and then pretty much everything else. We ask loads and loads of questions in the survey. But in this presentation, I just want to spend probably about 30 minutes or so presenting some of the key findings, specifically SEO, webinars, email marketing, and then some big picture numbers that might require us to get our calculators out or our Alexas out, Laura. But more of that later. We'll tackle that as and when they come up. We originally did this presentation back in December, so that was with my colleagues here, Sarah, Rebecca, and Frankie, which is why you'll see their faces appear on a number of slides. But today I'll go through what it is that the research has shown to us. But before we dive into that, just to share some context. So the survey was completed by professionals from over 140 leading companies in the science, life sciences, engineering, and healthcare industries. The majority of respondents come from SMEs, with the remaining third from medium to large organizations. The first couple of pages in the report go into a bit more detail on the people who replied to the survey. So to start with, let's walk through the number 1 marketing priority identified from the research, which was SEO. And I'm sure, as everyone on the call knows, search engine optimization, or SEO, is typically used to organically rank as high up in Google or other search engines as possible for the key search terms and keywords that mean the most to your target audience. And we've started with SEO because 66% of the respondents identified this as high or a very high priority for 2023. But at the same time, SEO was also rated as challenging or very challenging by just under half of the respondents. We look into the reasons why SEO is so challenging. We take notes from whenever we're doing client audits and things like that. And it's mainly because it's always changing, essentially. So algorithms adapt. AI is becoming more prevalent, especially with ChatGPT, which we were just chatting about a little bit before we came on the call. And I'm sure people have ideas and thoughts on that. So please do share them in the chat box or Q&A. Google Analytics is soon to be moving to GA4. So staying up to date with SEO in general and everything that goes with it, goes on when search is pretty daunting sometimes. And to be honest, it can be quite frustrating, especially if you're not constantly looking at this. So SEO is a game of adaptation, but also a long-term game. But the rewards can be good if you have the right resources and you put in the required effort. So we've put together a few formulas for success, and we wanted to share a couple of those with you here. So there's an acronym called EAT, which I'm sure a number of you have heard of, which is for expertise, authority, and trust. There's recently been an extra E added called experience, but that was added after we did this, so we can talk about that maybe a bit later on. But the first of the original E's is for expertise, and this can be shown through the use of author profiles on your content, like this example here. Show how your contributors, speakers, your KOLs are experts in their field through qualifications and their experiences, etc., and really highlight that in any publications that you add to your website. The A
Sorry,
is for,
Danny, I'm going to just constantly interrupt you as people come in. So
absolutely.
One of the questions I'm actually delighted someone asked, because I didn't know myself and I probably should have asked, but I didn't want to. What does CRO mean from the first slide?
Let's go back to this. So CRO is conversion rate optimization.
Okay, perfect.
So the way we use that is as part of an SEO strategy typically. So we're testing different calls to action, positions of headlines, positions of CTAs. You can do it on your website, you can do it on email, you can do it on your social ads, you can do it on everything. And we didn't mention much of it in the report purely because it was the first year that we'd actually asked about it. So we were expecting it to be high up. We've done other content around CRO. So if anyone is interested in learning more, just let me know afterwards and I can point you in the right direction.
Awesome. 3 people asked that, so I don't feel so bad actually now. I'll continue to ask things then that I don't understand. And the other one is like in terms of like a boot camp for SEO, like can you recommend one, or maybe that's what you're sort of going to go through with us now?
A boot camp for SEO, did you say? Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to mention a free audit that we offer at AZoNetwork in a minute. We've also done loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of content on SEO as well, which I'm more than happy to share. Other resources outside of AZoNetwork, Search Engine Land is a really good resource as well. And SEMrush as well is a really good resource. So if SEO is something you're interested in, again, let me know and I'll point you in the right direction once we're done today.
SEMrush is very expensive, isn't it? It's like $1,000 or $1,000 per month or something like that there. So you have to be
get
committed.
the actual platform is really expensive. If you're going to invest in that, then you need to be really committed to it. In terms of the resources, they've got really good free resources as well, which are useful. But if you wanted to fully take advantage of that platform, then yeah, you'd want to make sure you know what you're doing before making that investment.
The coolest bit about that for me is that it shows what your competitors are coming, like what keywords people are typing in for your competitors to come up, so that you can try to get on top of that as well. But yeah, you run before you can walk, I suppose is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So
walk before you can run.
we use SEMrush as part of our SEO services as well. So those sort of things you're talking about, they're included with that package. But yeah, there's some really well, there's just unbelievable amounts of data that you can find out about your competitors, about your own content, about everything. So yeah, if it's something people are interested in, then yeah, definitely check it out. But yeah, the cost isn't insignificant, so worth bearing in mind.
Okay.
The A is for authority, and that's about your sort of your brand reputation, particularly amongst other experts and influences within your industry. So when Google is, I'm referencing Google here just purely because I think it's 93% of searches done in the world is done via Google. So perhaps that's going to change in the future, but for today, I'm just referencing Google in terms
There
of
are
SEO.
other search engines available.
There are, yes.
We'll just say that and then we're covered.
So yeah, when Google's searching for reputational information, they're looking to find sources that were not written or created by yourself or by your company. So they're looking for the opinion of external authorities. So other companies that are linking back to your website, and linking back to your website and your website content, talking about your website or tagging your brand on socials, and referencing sort of your equipment or your machines in their research. So that's the sort of thing that Google's looking for when they're building when they're looking at the sort of the authority aspect of EAT.
So like if you're writing some content, it might be worthwhile having some sort of deal with someone that you work with to say, look, rather than us write another blog, why don't you write one about us and we'll write one about you? And that would tick this box.
That sort of thing could work, yeah. So you don't want to be, so you tend to get, there's a lot of bad eggs in SEO, so they'll try to like buy backlinks and they do things like that. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking for authentic backlinks. But for example, if you work with a company, they use your machine, they're very happy with it, absolutely ask them to write a piece, or even better, do a presentation on a webinar that you're sponsoring or something like that. Then you've got that piece of content that's coming from an alternative, an outside person, but it's completely authentic, and it will help with this aspect.
And Google
as well.
would be able to see a webinar, even though or you presumably need to write about it as well.
Yeah, so you do some sort of write-up of the webinar afterwards. So in terms of how you create your landing page and registration page, making sure that you've got the right content in there would involve some write-up from that event itself.
Okay.
And then the T is for trust. So trust is about your credibility and your authenticity. So what we just mentioned would also cover that, but also things like your online security. So do you have an SSL certificate, for example, on your website? That's the little padlock that you find in the browser. If you don't have that, that's sort of an immediate indication that something's not quite secure about your site. So that's an immediate red flag. Is your customer service reflected positively through online reviews and other sort of public forums? Are your articles citing trustworthy sources, and are they being referenced correctly? So all these things, when you put together, help to build those trust levels. And the most successful sites will be those that are putting across content in a way that showcases your brand's EAT whilst also being engaging and relevant to the target audience it's trying to appeal to. Now, another formula so if you've got lots of companies, they've got loads and loads of content, and it's all over the place and not necessarily organized in the best possible way. So one formula for organizing your content to benefit search results and your readers, of course, is to use a topic cluster model. So this model is perfect for any sort of content focused website, and is typically made up of a single pillar page, which acts as the sort of main hub for a larger topic, alongside the use of related content pages, which link back to that main pillar. So the site using a content cluster model shows they're showing sort of an intentional approach to content creation and authority on that main pillar topic, simply by making it easy for you, the user, to navigate, but also for the Google machines to navigate as well. So what that might look like. So this is
sorry, Danny.
Yeah.
When we're talking about backlinks and SEO, is product citations in a journal, would that contribute when it's not directly linked to the website, or do they contribute to your SEO?
Ooh, good question. I mean, backlinks are becoming less important overall now in terms of your overall strategy. They are still important. I wouldn't be able to give you an answer yes or no to that question, but certainly something we can take back to the SEO team and find a good answer.
I feel like because it wouldn't be necessarily linked then to your actual website itself, it would just be associated with your company page. I don't know if Google is clever enough to necessarily associate the two and then bump you up the rankings. You would almost need to write a piece of content that maybe referenced that particular place, and then that way you're sort of feeding it to Google to make it a bit easier for them.
How clever Google is a sort of an open question that we will never understand. So a lot of
maybe if I just said that, they'll hear me and they'll scoot my website down just out of punishment. They better be nice.
Be careful. You've got Alexa listening as well. So, but also what a lot of these recommendations come from is that Google will release sort of ideas and understanding about how best to use their algorithm to sort of use their algorithm or to benefit from their algorithm, and then they're constantly adapting, which is why it can be frustrating at times. That's why it's so important to be monitoring over a long period of time. So when there is an algorithm change, you can quickly pivot to change your strategy and make sure you're on top of these things, because there's a big difference between appearing number on page 1 and appearing on page 2. I mean, as soon as you're off that first page, I can't remember the exact stats, but it's very high, the amount of clicks that come from page 1.
Okay, yeah, I can imagine. And I do know that backlinks, I know they were very important before, but everyone just abused them because it was an easy one to sort of play. So now they've sort of, they don't look at them as strongly. Yeah,
so previously backlinks and then sort of keyword stuffing were like the two main ways you could get to the top of Google, but they got abused as sort of strategies. And there was a lot of sort of dodgy SEO companies out there that were using these strategies to try and help clients, but there was no relevance to them being in there, and Google worked this out, and that's why the sort of the content pillar and other strategies that we're talking about here are now much more effective ways of improving your rankings. All right, so if I just quickly show you this example of a topic cluster. So in this example, we can see the main topic or the pillar here is life science marketing. So we linked the cluster content made up of webinars, blogs, videos, interviews, podcasts, and thought leadership pieces. The supporting cluster content all supports that main pillar. And so that's improving the authority of the hub overall. So that's an example on our site. Example of pillar pages you can build out are your resource center, service pages, learning hubs. A lot of customers and lots of clients have got these on their sites now. And that's a really good way of helping Google to navigate your website, but also for your readers as well. So yeah, the key here is to guide your user in Google with listed related resources. So you want to make it each one as relatable as possible to that main topic. And this is what I was just referencing before. So that was just a very brief introduction to some SEO frameworks, but if you're one of the marketers who finds SEO challenging, or you just want to learn a bit more about your website and you haven't got the time or the resources to do so, either send a message in the Q&A or maybe chat to me on LinkedIn afterwards, and we can set you up with a free site audit. We basically go through what's working well on your website, areas that can be improved, and give you a report so you can then action those yourself. So yeah, anyone interested in that, let's chat about it afterwards, or put it in the chat. And there's loads of ebooks as well. So we've got the main market report that we'll share with you afterwards, but there's also this utilizing SEO for science ebook and an email marketing ebook. And I'll get the links in a second, and I'll put them in the chat before we're done today, so that everyone can take a look at those. So that was the first very brief introduction to SEO. We're now going to move into webinars, which is one of our favorite areas. We do dozens of webinars a year, both internally and externally. So we've got a few ideas here to help you improve your overall performance. So I think we alluded to on a previous slide, but the market report asked several questions about the various tactics marketers will be prioritizing in 2023. And it also asks to what extent they find those tactics difficult in terms of in-house resources, level of expertise, budgets, etc. And so we're going to talk a little bit about where webinars fell on those scales. So just under half of marketers consider webinars a high or very high priority in 2023. But at the same time, almost 3/4 of them find them to be challenging. And in all of our sort of webinar meetings with clients and our internal conversations, it tends to be these three main things that people find challenging about them. And it's getting enough people to sign up, getting the people who do sign up to actually turn up. So ensuring you have a sign up to turn up, a high sign up to turn up percentage, and then knowing what to do with the results afterwards and the data. So, I mean, webinar campaigns can provide you sometimes with an overwhelming amount of data points. So having a plan to manage that afterwards is really important. And we'll touch on a few of those challenges in just a moment. But it'd be interesting to see if those challenges are consistent with those experienced by the audience, or if there's anything else that you consider a main challenge. So throw them in the chat if you do, and or we can chat about those in a second. But they tend to be the
I am
three.
shocked it was only
three main ones.
42% that said it was important for them this year, because certainly most of the clients that we're working with, webinars are still one of the big things. A lot of people that even were putting them off once COVID hit, they kind of had no choice but to embrace them. So, and then they've realized that even when we are all back in person, there's still useful sort of methods in order to get your message out there. So 42% is lower than I would have expected.
Yeah, so we were a bit surprised by that. So we think they're great for when you combine it with your sort of overall event strategy. So before an event, if you're going to a big conference next month, you can do something ahead of that, release the product or do the product release at the event itself, and then do an online product release, because not everyone can go to that. So yeah, we think they fit in really well with various stages of the buying journey. And yeah, we were a little surprised about that as well. But to be honest, we haven't seen a decrease in demand for them. So
yeah,
perhaps we'll take that with a pinch of salt and then see next year how they compare.
Yeah.
Perhaps because in this sort of year after COVID, people aren't seeing them as such a high priority because they were the ultimate priority for a year, and that was everything that they did that year. So perhaps they'll still be a priority, but just not to the extent as they were. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see in 2024 if that's a similar figure.
Yeah, we're in terms of when we looked at this last year, the percentage was a lot higher whenever we were looking at it in the COVID years. So we're like, that was their number one priority. Yeah,
99%, I think.
Yeah.
In the COVID years. Because I remember thinking, who are the people who aren't doing them? So
yeah.
I just remember thinking, what have they been doing?
What are you doing?
Yeah. But because they're the sort of the three main challenges, I just wanted to share a few thoughts on what I think and what we think as a company are some of the best ways to overcome each of those challenges. So if we first look at getting enough people to sign up, so when we're presented with this challenge, we normally ask a couple of questions, and they are: how much time are you leaving to promote pre-event? And ideally, we think you should be looking at sort of 6 to 12 weeks, and that seems like a long time, but if you can get all your stuff together, then that's always good. And then what is your plan post-event with the on-demand promotion? So when we say on-demand promotion, we're not just, well, when we're looking at webinar signups, we're not just looking at the pre-event signups. We recommend having 3 separate plans to enhance your reach post-event as well. So you'll get a certain number of people who sign up. So for everyone who registers but doesn't attend live, send them the recording. I think that's typically what 99% of people do. They send the link out. But for those who do attend live, send them the link as well, but also try and leverage, hopefully, the positive experience they've had by encouraging them to share that link internally or with their other channels. So whenever we're on an event, we'll say, if you like what you hear and like what you see, please screenshot a picture of a slide, share it on your social channels. When you get the link, please forward it on to your colleagues who might find it relevant and interesting. So trying to leverage that hopefully positive experience with the people who do attend live. But then thirdly,
sorry, that was one of the questions that just came in there in terms of comparing the people that engage with it pre and post. So are we saying that 20% then of the people overall actually engage with it after the fact?
So that number there, so this is what I think is perhaps the most important factor that people miss, is that we're finding that 15 to 20% of people, so in completely new people register after. So you've done your initial promotion, you've got, say, 200 people to sign up, 100 turned up live, 100 didn't, maybe 50 of them watched on demand. So you've got 150 out of the 200 who have watched it. But if you continue to promote it to new audiences post-event, most of the time, the content is still going to be relevant. So if you continue to promote to the audiences for the on-demand link, we're finding that we're getting another 15 to 20% of completely new audiences signing up, watching on demand. They're all leaving exactly the same data points. They're having a very similar experience because of the way the on-demand webinar is set up. They're still answering polls. They're still doing the survey. They can still ask their questions. They just come via email afterwards. So as long as that on-demand experience is as good as the live experience, there's no reason why you shouldn't be benefiting from a full sort of 12 months of promotion for a webinar. It doesn't work with every event, but it does work with the vast majority of webinars that people tend to run.
But it's interesting because most people probably then just stop, and it's a shame given that you've done the work is there, the content is there, you're sort of wasting that in a way if you're not then continuing to promote.
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of people, I think everyone's guilty of this. You pat yourself on the back. It's always good to get a webinar under your belt and everyone's happy and everyone's feeling pumped, and then you sort of forget about it and move on to the next one. Whereas most of the time, what you've just presented or what your key opinion leaders just presented is going to be relevant for a fairly long stretch of time. And without requiring that much extra work, you can still leverage that content for new leads, new signups, et cetera, et cetera. Or if you've got the presentation recorded, you can use that in a completely new webinar if you wanted to change the title, change the description, have a sort of a simu-live webinar experience where you use that presentation again with new people for the Q&A or something like that. But there's definitely an opportunity to get more from your main piece of content and ultimately get enough more signups from it.
I know what a lot of the time you guys do as well is you would then tend to write a blog about that particular webinar and just have it sort of in a different form in a way. And then that way you can take wee snippets of that as well. I don't know if maybe you go into this later, but being able to sort of use that same piece of content, but in, lots of different ways as well, make it go further basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to repurpose the stuff that takes the most time as much as possible. So we also want to make it available for people who consume content in different ways. So we'll usually make an audio file of a webinar, sometimes upload that to the podcast platforms if it works on a podcast platform. We'll do a write-up as well, so people who prefer to read the content can do, and we'll also embed the original video file within that piece. The snippets, so they're sort of like 30 to 60 second key highlights from a webinar where someone said something really interesting, ideally trying to sort of get people's attention and make them watch the full event. And we'll post those to social media and things like that and embed them in various blog pieces. But there's loads and loads and loads of additional stuff you can get from doing that initial big piece of work. And like I said, we're big fans of making the most of the hard work. So once you've done the hard work to get your speaker in to give a presentation on how they've used your product in their lab or something like that, try to utilize that as much as you can to really benefit and get more people engaged in signing up.
And we're being asked more on the sort of ungated side of things. So obviously it's quite clear how you can get leads and things once it's gated and you can get those through and you know exactly what's happening. Once it's ungated, how can you utilize that? Or is it just sort of brand awareness at that stage?
It can still be brand awareness, but you can also, if you embed your sort of forms within your ungated video file sort of strategically, then if people are interested and they want to know more, they want to speak to sales and things like that, you can embed those forms within that video file so that they appear or they pop up on the screen. And also if they're watching the video file on your website itself, if the content that they're receiving is of interest to them and they want to know more, they're going to reach out if you've got clear call to actions on your website as well. So yeah, the ungated period tends to be, we tend to do it after a year. So this is slightly wrong for what we do the majority of the time. But you can definitely still generate leads. It's just at that stage, those leads are going to be pretty much, okay, I want to speak to somebody in your product team or your sales team, et cetera, et cetera.
And just to clarify what we mean by ungated, so typically when you upload such nice pieces of content that you've put a lot of effort in terms of like webinars, you would tend to put a form in front of it. So the white papers, you'll see this a lot where it says to download our white paper, put in your details, and then you get like your sales guy gets a lead that says this guy downloaded this white paper. So when we're talking about ungated, we're talking about removing that form and just putting it out there to the world, and no barriers for them to actually get there. But therein lies the problem that you don't necessarily know who's watching anymore. And now we're saying that you need to then rely on the rest of your website to do the work in terms of that user journey and making sure that there's call to actions there that they get in touch.
Yeah, and I think the way the world's going, I'm sure there'll be more ungated content over the next 5 to 10 years. But that'll be another challenge. Maybe that's another webinar for next year. So the second common challenge is getting people to turn up. So this isn't always going to be possible. So of course you want people to, even if you have all those on-demand views, you still want people to turn up to the live event and experience the live event. It's better for the Q&A, it's better for the chat interaction, and it tends to make for a better event overall. So most platforms will allow you to automate reminder emails. So we find sending two the first one day before the event, and the second either 30 minutes or 1 hour before you go live has the most positive impact.
Is Zoom okay to use for this? I mean, is that the go-to platform, or is there anything nicer these days, or is Zoom okay?
Zoom's good. I know we're on Zoom call now, so I'll be very
well, you're allowed to complain, that's fine. We'll pivot.
No, Zoom's good. The beauty of Zoom is that pretty much everyone's familiar with it now. So it was Zoom and Teams were the go-to video conferencing apps during the pandemic. So now the vast majority of people are comfortable with them. We use a different platform for our webinars called Big Marker. We use that because we think the interactive elements to it make for a better overall experience. I mean, we're doing dozens and dozens and dozens of these a year, so that's why we've got our own platform set up. But Zoom is good. Yeah, Zoom covers pretty much everything you want it to cover.
Okay. It will give you your nice landing page. I mean, you can always upgrade that as well, put it on your own website and embed the Zoom link into your own website, which is always better. But at least that then automatically sends out these sort of alerts that you're referring to here to make sure that people, turn up.
Yeah, absolutely. So you should be able to do that with pretty much all the platforms. And now there are so many webinar platforms because more people are using video conferencing. If you are thinking about getting your own license, just spend a lot of time sort of comparing to other ones, speak to people who have already done that work. So more than happy for people to send me a message, because I did a lot of this stuff a few years ago, comparing and contrasting the various. So I've done a lot of the painful stuff for you. So by all means, do reach out if you are thinking about getting a webinar platform subscription anytime soon.
Hopin was another one that was big at the time. It was a bit buggy when it was initially launched as it evolved, because it has a really nice speed networking at the end, which I always enjoyed, where basically speed dating, but you got matched with someone for two minutes or whatever, and I enjoyed that aspect of it.
Yeah, so Hopin's evolved quite nicely. So yeah, it was a bit buggy to start with, but like with a lot of new sort of softwares, there's always elements of adaptation and learning and things like that. But yeah, it's a good platform. So that was on our shortlist.
Nice.
So if anyone from Hopin's listening, you just missed out. I'm sorry.
We actually use it internally as well, Hopin. So we are a remote company and there's 55 of us. So it's nice actually to do that speed networking with your own employees. I know that sounds a bit bizarre maybe for those that sit in an office, but it's and we use a free version. So it does go quite far before you actually need to pay for it. So it is worth looking into if you're not talking, hundreds and hundreds of attendees to these things.
Yeah. So yeah, that's another thing to consider. If you're not doing sort of huge hundreds of people events, then to be honest, Zoom will probably be fine. Zoom Teams, they could probably cover what you're looking for. If you're doing events where you want to get hundreds and hundreds of people, you want it to be really interactive, have breakout rooms, speed dating, other things that are on offer now, then you might want to look elsewhere. But like I said, if anyone's on that sort of path at the moment and they want to have a chat about stuff, then please get in touch and we can certainly have a conversation about. That's nothing I love more than nerding out about webinar platforms. So please do get in touch. So yeah, they're the reminder emails. Then you've got social posts as well. One of the beauties of doing a pre-recorded presentation before the live event is you can take those social snippets that we were talking about previously and use them as part of the pre-event promotion. If you're doing the event fully live, then you can use them for your on-demand promotion, but that's just another idea. Account managers, sales teams, if they can touch base, if they've got clients that are coming to your webinars who've signed up, getting them to touch base with them before the day before and reminding them about the events also a really good idea. But even with all that, you're still probably looking at anywhere between 30-60% max who will turn up live to your webinars. And so those that don't show up, what we always recommend is that you want to get a really key important data point from them during the registration process, so that you have an idea of what the best next step should be. So there can be a million reasons why someone wouldn't register. People are often, they'll say to me, oh, why have 300 people signed up but only 100 have come? There's a million reasons why people sign up in the first place and might not be able to attend, time zones, workloads, picking up kids, etc., etc. There's millions of reasons. So rather than beat yourself up about it, if you've done all the sort of the steps that we've just mentioned, then the best thing to do is to make sure you have a data point on them. So this example on the screen, this is a real life example. Would you like to receive a sample for testing? So everyone, I think 400 people signed up for this event. I think 50% of them said yes to this. Not all of them turned up live or watched on demand, but they've got that point of reference for starting a conversation after the event itself. They can send them that test. Sales and product teams can follow up with them and see how it went, etc., etc. So you need to accept the fact that not everyone who signs up is going to turn up. They're not going to watch it on demand.
What is good? What is a percentage? What would you consider a success?
It depends. I know that's a politician's answer. So as close to 50% as possible is usually what we're looking at. Obviously, the higher the better, but we've really sort of switched our focus to making sure that the on-demand aspect is as good as the live experience. So although we want people to turn up live because, like I mentioned, we want the chat to be, we want the Q&A to be buzzing, we want the chat to be buzzing, etc. If 40% turn up live and then another 20% turn up on demand, and then we get a whole new 20% of people signing up afterwards, we would consider that excess. Anything under 30%, and then we're starting to think there's something sort of gone wrong with, have we sent out the right reminder emails? Have they gone out the right? We start to sort of think there's something gone wrong there. But yeah, I think the overall average sort of across all industries is under 50% now for turning up live. I think it's 48% or something like that. So I expect that number to continue to go down, but at the same time, the people watching on demand on their own terms, on their own times, that number's going way up. So there's absolutely still a place for good webinars, as long as you've got the right strategy and the right mindset, to ensure that you're making the experience as good post-event as it is at the live event. And then the biggest problem usually is that you get overwhelmed with all this data points. So typically on any one registrant, you can have anything from sort of 10 to 15 data points on them. And if you get all that in an Excel sheet and you give it to your sales team and say, can you follow up with this? Probably not going to be, it's not going to get the best sort of responses. It's definitely not the most effective approach. So we typically are looking to gather, we recommend gathering data points during registration, the event itself with polls, and then the survey after the event. At each of those stages, you're going to get a percentage of drop-offs, which is why we said ask the most important question in the registration. And by asking the right questions, you can then properly segment your audience into buckets, indicating their stage in the buying journey. Assuming that this is a product-related event that you're running, each bucket will then require a different next step. So if you're going from left to right on the screen, someone who's looking or is attending just to expand their knowledge, they might benefit from another piece of content, but there's probably no need for a sales call there. Moving further along, people who are actively in the buying process, you want to get them on the phone as quickly as possible, because presumably they're comparing you with other vendors as well. So you want to make sure you contact them as soon as possible. But by having this framework in place, you end up with sort of a list for each section, and then sales team, business development, or your marketing teams can prioritize on what to do next. And then you're going to get a much sort of better overall response from doing that. Cool. So that's it for webinars. Any other questions, Laura, about webinars specifically, or shall I move on to email marketing?
Well, one is sort of about in terms of how you're are you doing really highly targeted sort of outreach, or how many people are you inviting? I assume you don't quite know how many, and that you're just putting it onto social and seeing who comes. And that this particular person said they're lucky if we get 10% to attend, so that sounds like it's incredibly low. And what's the average webinar audience size, which I suppose is a wee bit of a how long is a piece of string, because it depends what the topic is on. If it's on vocal microscopes, or if it's on Chat GPT, there's probably different audiences there.
So yeah, so for our marketing ones, it's anything from sort of between 200 and 500 people register, and then we're looking at 40 to 60% people turn up live. For our life science client marketing, for our life science webinars for our clients, and again, the average is into the sort of the several hundreds. But again, the average people turning up live is around that 40 to 60%. But like I mentioned, that 15 to 20% is we've really tried to sell this idea of the 12-month campaign now, where we're going to get this many people signing up beforehand, this many people watching live, this many people watching on demand, and then a whole new bunch of folks who are going to sign up afterwards and watch that as well.
And do you see it better in terms of like the content? Is it better if they get a KOL to talk about the product and how they've used it, or is a generic one just as effective, or is there ones that win?
Yeah, so we get a mixture of internal, so product managers talking about products, and then key opinion leaders talking about how they've used it in their lab. And to be honest, as long as the content's delivered well, that tends to be the sort of the main thing. I mean, it's always great if somebody else is talking about your product rather than you, but a lot of the time people are on the call because they want to find out how it works and they want to get into the sort of the nitty-gritty of it. So if your product manager is the best person to do that, then absolutely put them up. A combination of the two, I think, is the best. So you want to have someone outside of your company who's used your product to do the sort of the bulk of the presentation, your product manager to perhaps go in a bit more detail into certain specifications of it, and then have a Q&A with or sort of a round table Q&A with the two of them, potentially somebody from sales as well, if it's that sort of webinar. But just going back to the person who said 10%, if it is that low, I'd look at things like time zones, making sure that you've optimized those for your target audience. For example, we do a lot of our audiences in North America, but also in Europe. So we typically use a sort of afternoon UK time. So we get East Coast US, Central Time US as well. Yeah, so if it's that low, then there is probably a few things that are worth looking at. So if you want to share some more, then we can definitely have a chat about that as well.
And do you know, in terms of the people that are signing up, where they're coming from? Is it coming from the email campaign, or is it social posts? Is it LinkedIn? What do you know? I know you mentioned phone calls there as well.
Yeah, so again, I'll just reference that. So our internal marketing webinars is a real mixture of, because we've done so many now, people are sort of coming back. So a lot of the signups come from LinkedIn. But email and newsletters tend to be sort of the main one, especially when we run client webinars. So we have a huge database, and we basically segment that database by keywords, applications, geolocations, etc. We'll put together a mailing list, and then we'll send that mailing list the invites. I'm going to talk a little bit about what those invites should look like in this section, nice. Actually. So
I suppose, sorry, no, I just saw the topic. I was about to ask you if email is bad, but you're about to tell us.
Well, it's one of those things that everyone always says. It's those theories you see on LinkedIn a lot of the time from so-called gurus. But our report basically tells us that it's absolutely not. That in fact, it's surpassed CRM as the most widely used marketing technology. So that's like 70% of people are using some sort of automated email marketing software. But one of the reasons you often hear that email is dead is because there's a pretty low point of entry. So because they're easy to use, because it's easy to do, essentially, they're widely used. Because they're widely used, there's a lot of noise, and because there's a lot of noise, standing out is pretty tricky. So to master your emails, ensure they stand out, we've got a couple of frameworks that we like to use.
Someone has asked, actually, which probably is worth answering before we get into what emails to send. They're asking how to get the emails in the first place if they're a small company. So, I mean, it depends on who you're selling your products to. So on this call, it's everyone selling into scientists. So either they're going to be academic researchers or they're going to be sort of biotech and pharma people. When it comes to academics, I mean, you can get those fairly easily. You can look at things like NIH Reporter, which will actually show the funding in your area, and the email address will be on NIH Reporter for each individual person that you can go and get. It's a little bit of work, but it's worth doing. And the same thing on their academic web pages, they're there. You'll also see the corresponding author when you're looking at publications. They're there as well, so that you can add them into your database. When it comes to biotech and pharma, it is admittedly a little bit trickier, and that's where LinkedIn actually does come into play, and it can be very, very useful. When it comes to biotech and pharma, they still do publish, so they will still be corresponding author, but it is admittedly trickier to find because they're not sitting there in NIH Reporter or on their lovely academic page. So if that particular person, it's an anonymous question, but if they're interested, they can ping me and I can give them more tailored response to whoever they're specifically looking for. But that data is out there. It is just a pain, frankly, to get, but once you have it, it's totally worth it. And obviously you can see from that previous graph, it's still the number one way people are doing it. In terms of opt-in to send marketing emails, there's sort of GDPR would be the strictest. There's CCPA, there's lots of different ones throughout the world, but GDPR is the strictest, so it tends to be the one that we focus on. And as long as you tick those boxes, you tend to then tick all the can spam and other ones as well. So there's two things to consider when you're looking at GDPR. One's called expectation of privacy. So if their email address was in the public domain in the first place, then it's easier to send them those messages because they've put their data in, the public domain in association with their research. But in that same vein, you need to make sure that you're messaging them about what they're interested in. So that's your legitimate interest clause. So you can't just message them about science in general. The more targeted, the better. To be honest, all GDPR does is make us better marketers, because we should have been doing that in the first place, and there was a laziness maybe that didn't. Now we're forced to make sure that we're messaging the right people with the right content and have more and more targeted content, which will give us a better return anyway. So in terms of GDPR, so long as you're doing your job well, it should be okay. And then have all that boring, unsubscribe and respect that, of course, whenever they do that. But otherwise, we're good. And as you can see from that graph, everyone is that's still their number one method of reaching out to people.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point about it making us better marketers, because privacy and other legislation is only going to get stricter over the next 5-10 years. It's not going to get easier. So yeah, it makes you think outside the box. It takes away the laziness and will definitely give you better results if you're working towards those. Well, so these principles, so we've actually sent somewhere over 250 million emails over the 20 or so years that we've been going. So we've made all the mistakes for you, and our head of email, Torsten, he's done some pretty extensive research over the last 12 months, and he's established these frameworks and have generated the best results over that time. So the guiding principles of this framework you can see on the screen. So number one, who's it for? Is your brand or the third-party brand that's sending the email a recognized and trusted leader within that space? What's in it for the reader? Like with any marketing, what's in it? Why should I bother to read this? Are you quickly and clearly highlighting why I should be reading your email? And then, okay, I like what I've read. What do I do now? Make it seamless as possible for readers to take the next action, whether that be sign up for a webinar or to read the white paper or to read whatever it is. Just make it clear and easy as possible. And as Laura just mentioned, if you are sending emails, make sure that your unsubscribe process isn't one of those ones that takes you through about 10 different stages and then says, are you sure you want to unsubscribe and start? You know what I'm talking about. You want everyone's experienced that with some companies, and it is frustrating, and is a really good and quick way of annoying people. So not good for your brand. So make sure that that's an easy process. But this is the framework. There is an email ebook as well, which I'm gonna share in the chat at some point. So this will go into way more detail. But I wanted to comment on email specifically for webinars, because that's the area I spend most of my time. That's where my experience is. And because I think half the respondents said they were sending webinar invite emails regularly. So a few little ideas about how to get more from them. So how are we doing for time, by the way, Laura? Are we good? 10 minutes. I'll just keep going, and we'll see how we get on. See if we can beat last year.
Yeah.
So number one, are we stating what we just said? So what we just said on the previous slide, are we stating what's in it for the reader as quickly and as effectively as possible? So you can do that typically by taking sort of 3 to 5 key learning objectives and highlighting those high up in that email. Number two, if you plan to send your email multiple times, then are you adapting the messaging each time? So changing subject lines, pre-headers, the actual content of the email itself can increase responses and help you to test what resonates, avoids the same message from the same person with the same subject appearing in your inbox every week at the same time. And I've got some ideas about how you can differentiate those emails in just a second. And number three, mix up the designs, the graphics, the positions of CTAs as well. So basically using a variety of different emails as part of the same campaign. So if you have a webinar and you want to send 3 emails for that particular event, email 1 might be an overview of the event and why you should attend. Email 2 could go deeper on the research that's going to be presented. And email 3 could focus on the speakers, the KOLs, their previous work, where they've been from, et cetera, et cetera. So each email gives the reader something new, something more of an incentive to register. So if they haven't registered by the first email or the second email, they're more likely to register. The third
And 3
email.
is the best, you find?
So we'll typically do 3 pre-event and then 1 or 2 post-event as well.
Okay.
So typically a roundup with sort of this is what happened in the webinar, this is what you can learn if you watch on demand, etc. for email 4, and then occasionally email 5 if it's been part of a series or something like that. We might do a series roundup email, something like that. So the sort of key takeaway is to basically not send the same thing over and over and over again with the same person sending it, the same email subject, etc., because it just becomes easier to ignore, and you haven't given them a new reason to sign up now that they didn't have when they first received that email.
I think we are sort of coming up on time, so there are a few other questions, actually some about our SEO conversation before as well, unless there's something you want to just quickly cover off in terms of the email content.
Yeah, so this was the last slide for the email content. It's basically about making sure you've got referral links or UTM codes on your links so that you're tracking and monitoring the most effective channels, the copy that worked, that resonated, etc., etc. So like with all digital marketing, having good referral data is always really important.
Perfect. So yeah, feel free to comment on the email contents and how to sort of invite people to webinars. There's a few questions on SEO, just so we go back before. So we discussed before in terms of what is the difference between page 1 and page 2, but actually the different positions within page 1 makes a huge difference on click-through rate. So the number 1, it's about 26% in terms of click-through rate. If you're the second position, you're 14.4. Then about 9% for 3, and then it kind of drops off a cliff thereafter. So really you're trying to get into those sort of top 3, top 4. Otherwise, there's just no point if you're page 2. Yeah. And then another question came in terms of SEO. So can you possibly do SEO on a global basis, or really should you be picking countries and focusing on those and putting your effort and time into that?
So you can do it on a global basis if you've got the resources to. What we would suggest is that you focus on your primary target markets to begin with. But if you've got the resources and the know-how in those other markets, then absolutely.
And in terms of AdWords and paid campaigns, are they still sort of valid in this day and age, or would you prefer to sort of try and do it organically if you can?
So we prefer to do it organically. We recommend clients do it organically, but we do also offer Google Ads services as well. They absolutely have a place. You will get results from them without doubt, and you'll get them quicker. But the return on the investment will be way lower. So although SEO is going to take you a bit more time, the benefits will be higher in the long run. So yes, they still have a
Always
place.
considered it's the last it's your last bit. Once you've done everything else, then go on ahead and do your Google AdWords or whatever, but and paid ads. But there's a lot you can do. They're lower hanging fruit that are cheaper that you can do before then.
Yeah, if you're a huge enterprise company, you've got massive marketing budgets, then absolutely have Google Ads as well. But if you've got limited resources and you're trying to look for the best channels, then Google Ads wouldn't be the first place I would look.
I've also a lot of people are doing more in terms of that retargeting and things like that, and that can be a cheaper way to do it as well. Or LinkedIn ads as well, obviously, are a lot more targeted, particularly if you're trying to sell to specific scientists and you're a smaller company. You can really target where, yes, okay, they cost more, but at least you're getting in front of the right audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So we prefer using LinkedIn ads, to be honest, because we know it's going to get in front of the right people. It's essentially like putting advertising in a company's office for you if you do LinkedIn ads effectively, whereas Google ads, you're putting it out on the road and 99% of the people aren't going to be relevant a lot of the time.
What people don't know as well, quite often, is that you can actually target one person as well. In theory, if I wanted to sell to Danny, I can pop Danny's LinkedIn URL and only show him an ad as well. If you really want to be, that's like that story where someone put up a billboard and the guy's wide of work in order to sell to him. That's a cheaper way of doing it. You can do that now, and I don't think a lot of people know that that's possible on LinkedIn. There's a few questions here in terms of recordings. This will absolutely be recorded and it will be put up. And we obviously now have to take Danny's advice. You've just given me a lot more work because I now apparently need to write a blog and use this content over and post it because I can't just stop and walk away.
Podcast, Laura, podcast, video file, blog, yeah, social snippets. Yeah, sorry, there's loads.
But that's really that's my number one takeaway from this, to be honest, is that I have to admit that I kind of did always have the impression that you did your webinar and then you whacked it up and sort of hoped maybe people came across it in the future, but letting that sort of work harder for you once you've done the hard work definitely is something that I've taken away here. If there are any other questions, we've obviously run out of time here, but let us know. You kind of do we have Danny's details? Are they going to come up at the end here? Can you scoot across?
So Laura, I'm just going to grab I'm going to grab the various links to the ebooks and the market report, and I'll put
do that. And anyway, we will we'll forward them out to all the registrants as well, because I think they had all requested the state of the marketing report. Had we known, we would have obviously asked that question upon registration, but we will in future. But we'll get that across to everyone as well, so that they have that information and the SEO stuff as well. But anything else, should let us know. And thanks for everyone joining us today. Thanks, Danny, for your time. And I guess I'll see you next year.
You'll see how far we can get through the slides next year. But yeah, thanks, Laura, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join us.
Perfect. I'll fix it. Bye-bye.
See you later.
Bye, everyone.